The year was 2387 and Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Horizon, watching the stars bend around them as they traveled faster than light. His crew of 42 humans had been exploring space for 3 months now using their new quantum tunnel drive. They were the first human ship to travel this far from Earth. Amy Rodriguez sat at her station monitoring communications when her screen lit up with warnings. Energy readings were off the charts. Something massive was approaching their position. She turned to Captain Morrison with wide eyes. "Captain, I'm picking up something huge coming our way. The energy signature is unlike anything in our database." Morrison walked over to look at her readings. The numbers made no sense. Whatever was approaching them had more power than entire Earth cities combined. He remained calm, as he always did when facing the unknown. "All stations, prepare for contact. Ben, get security ready but keep weapons powered down. Lisa, start scanning whatever is coming our way." Dr. Lisa Chang was already at her science station running scans. The readings made her heart race with excitement rather than fear. This was what they had come to space to find, something completely new. Sergeant Ben Parker checked his security teams but felt no panic. His military training had prepared him for anything. The crew trusted their captain and each other. They had faced dangers before and always found a way through. Space around them began to shimmer and twist. Reality itself seemed to bend as something enormous emerged from what looked like a tear in space itself. The horizon shook slightly from the gravitational waves. What appeared before them was beyond anything humans had imagined. A ship stretched across 15 kilometers of space. Its dark metal hull bristled with weapons that could destroy planets. Strange symbols glowed along its surface in colors that hurt to look at directly. The alien vessel dwarfed the horizon completely. It was like comparing a shark to a minnow. Any reasonable species would have immediately tried to flee or surrender. The humans did neither. Morrison studied the massive ship with curiosity rather than terror. His crew remained at their stations doing their jobs. No one panicked or begged to retreat. They were humans, and humans had never been good at knowing when they were outmatched. "Impressive design," Dr. Chang said while taking readings. "The power distribution system must be incredibly advanced. I'm detecting at least 40 different types of energy signatures." Amy worked to establish communication protocols. Her hands were steady as she tried different frequencies and languages. "Captain, I'm getting responses on several channels. They seem surprised we're trying to talk to them." The alien ship moved closer until it blocked out the stars completely. Weapon ports along its hull began to glow with deadly energy. Any other species would have been begging for mercy by now. Instead, Morrison opened a communication channel and spoke in his normal, calm voice. "Unknown vessel. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth ship Horizon. Please state your intentions in this area." The silence that followed lasted several long minutes. On the bridge of the alien ship, creatures that had conquered most of the galaxy stared at their screens in disbelief. No inferior species had ever made demands of them before. Admiral Zeth Carr was a massive reptilian creature with obsidian scales and burning amber eyes. He commanded this sector of space for the Taraxian hegemony, an empire that had ruled 847 star systems for 3,000 years. His ship, the Dread Sovereign, had never met resistance it could not crush. The Admiral looked at the tiny human vessel on his screens. It should have been fleeing in terror or broadcasting surrender messages. Instead, it sat calmly in space as if meeting ships like his was an everyday occurrence. "Scan their vessel," he ordered his weapons officer. "How are they not afraid?" The Taraxian crew ran detailed scans of the human ship. What they found made no sense. The humans showed no signs of panic. Their heart rates were elevated but steady. Their brain patterns showed curiosity and alertness rather than fear. This had never happened before in the Empire's long history of conquest. Every species they encountered either fled immediately or collapsed into terrified submission. These humans were actually studying them back. Admiral Zeth Carr opened a communication channel. His voice carried the authority of someone who had never been disobeyed. "Primitive vessel, you will surrender immediately. Your ship and crew now belong to the Taraxian Empire. Resistance will result in destruction." Morrison listened to the translation and looked around his bridge. His crew met his eyes with steady gazes. They were scared but not broken. Fear had never stopped humans from doing what needed to be done. "I'm afraid that won't work for us," Morrison replied politely. "We're on a peaceful exploration mission. Perhaps we could discuss trade agreements instead." The Tyraxian bridge fell completely silent. In 3 millennia of expansion, no species had ever rejected their demands. The Admiral's tactical officer looked confused as he reported that the human ship was not powering weapons or attempting to flee. Dr. Chang had been studying their readings of the alien ship. She opened her own communication channel without asking permission. "Fascinating bone structure visible through your hull scans. Your species appears to be descended from apex predators. The cranial ridges suggest enhanced sensory capabilities." The Tyraxian crew exchanged bewildered looks. Their prey was studying them like research subjects. This small, primitive ship was treating the most feared fleet in the galaxy like a scientific curiosity. Ben Parker had been analyzing the alien weapon systems from their energy signatures. He keyed his communicator to Morrison. "Captain, their weapon design is interesting but pretty inefficient. I can see at least 6 ways to improve their plasma containment systems from here." Admiral Zethkar heard these transmissions translated and felt something he had never experienced before. These humans were not impressed by his massive warship. They were critiquing its design while calmly discussing trade agreements. The Admiral decided to board their vessel personally. He would show these strange creatures what happened when someone defied the Tyraxian Empire. He assembled his most fearsome honor guard and prepared to demonstrate proper respect for their superiors. As the Tyraxian boarding craft approached the horizon, Morrison prepared to welcome them aboard. His crew remained calm and professional. They had no weapons ready and showed no signs of the terror that usually greeted Tyraxian warriors. "Amy, please prepare the main cargo bay for our guests. Lisa, bring your scanning equipment. I have a feeling we're about to make history." The first meeting between humans and the galaxy's greatest predators was about to begin. Neither species knew it yet, but this moment would change everything for civilizations across the stars. Admiral Zethkar stepped through the airlock into the human ship, expecting to find cowering primitives begging for their lives. Instead, he found Captain Morrison waiting calmly in the cargo bay, with a slight smile on his face. 2 other humans stood beside him looking curious rather than terrified. The Admiral was 3 meters tall with scales that gleamed like black metal. His honor guard of 6 warriors carried plasma rifles that could melt through steel. Their red eyes glowed in the dim light, and their claws scraped against the metal floor. They were the most feared soldiers in the galaxy. "Welcome aboard the Horizon," Morrison said, as if greeting old friends. "I'm Captain Jake Morrison. Would you care for some coffee while we talk?" Dr. Lisa Chang stepped forward with her tablet, completely ignoring the weapons pointed at her. She looked up at the massive alien with the excitement of a scientist making a new discovery. Her scanner beeped as she took readings. "Remarkable bone density. Your species clearly evolved from predators. Those jaw muscles could probably bite through most metals. Are those chromatophore cells in your scales? They seem to shift color slightly with your emotional state." Sergeant Ben Parker leaned casually against a cargo container examining his fingernails. He glanced at the alien weapons with professional interest rather than fear. "Interesting plasma rifle design. Pretty basic containment system, though. Must overheat after sustained fire." The Tyraxian warriors looked at each other in confusion. Their prey was analyzing their equipment and biology instead of begging for mercy. This had never happened before in their thousands of years of conquest. Admiral Zethkar drew himself up to his full, imposing height. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "I am Admiral Zethkar of the Tyraxian hegemony. Your ship and crew now belong to the Empire. You will surrender immediately or face destruction." Morrison listened politely, then shook his head. "That's not going to work for us, Admiral. We're explorers, not conquerors. How about we discuss mutually beneficial arrangements instead?" The Admiral's amber eyes flared brighter. No inferior species had ever refused his demands. His honor guard raised their weapons, but the humans showed no change in behavior. They remained relaxed and interested. Dr. Chang was still scanning the aliens with obvious fascination. Your cardiovascular system must be incredibly efficient to support that body mass. Do you have multiple hearts? The electromagnetic field around your scales suggests some kind of energy storage capability. Doctor, Morrison said mildly, perhaps our guests would like to see our ship while we talk. Admiral, we'd be happy to give you a tour of our technology. The suggestion was so unexpected that Zethkar found himself agreeing before he realized what he was doing. No conquered species had ever offered to show him their secrets. They usually tried to hide their capabilities. Morrison led the group through the ship's corridors while explaining human space exploration. The aliens followed in stunned silence as crew members went about their duties without showing any fear of the armed warriors in their midst. Engineer Mike Davis was working on a power coupling when they passed. He looked up at the massive aliens and nodded politely. Afternoon, Captain. Are these our new friends? Interesting energy weapons they have there. The Tyraxian warriors had never been called friends by their victims before. They were trained killers who brought terror to entire star systems. Yet these humans treated them like curious neighbors. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Carol White explained how their quantum tunnel drive worked. She drew diagrams and showed technical specifications while the Admiral's tactical officers took notes despite themselves. The power requirements are enormous, she said cheerfully. But we managed to solve the containment problems by using a rotating magnetic field array. Your ships probably use something similar for their main drives. The Tyraxians exchanged glances. Their own engineers had struggled with similar problems for centuries. This primitive species was casually sharing solutions to advanced physics problems. Dr. Chang continued her biological studies during the tour. She asked the Admiral about Tyraxian physiology, diet, and social structure as if conducting a friendly scientific interview. The Admiral found himself answering questions he had never been asked before. Your species must have incredible longevity based on cellular regeneration patterns I'm seeing. How long do Tyraxians typically live? Do you reproduce through eggs or live birth? Ben Parker was examining the alien weapons with professional curiosity. These plasma chambers could be more efficient with better cooling systems. Mind if I take a look at the power cell design? I might have some suggestions. The honor guard was completely bewildered. Their weapons were meant to inspire terror, not technical discussions. One warrior actually handed over his rifle for Parker to examine when the human asked politely. In the medical bay, Dr. Chang showed them human anatomy displays. The Tyraxians stared in fascination at the complex human brain structure and dense muscle tissue. Humans were physically weaker, but their neural complexity was remarkable. We're persistence predators, Chang explained. We evolved to chase prey over long distances rather than ambush them. That's probably why we don't give up easily when facing challenges. Admiral Zethkar was beginning to understand why these humans showed no fear. They saw everything as a puzzle to solve or a challenge to overcome. Fear was simply not part of their response pattern when encountering new situations. The tour ended in the ship's small recreational area, where Morrison offered the aliens human food and drink. The Admiral tasted coffee for the first time while his warriors tried chocolate bars with obvious enjoyment. This is quite pleasant, the Admiral admitted. Your species seems remarkably adaptable. Most civilizations we encounter are too frightened to think clearly during first contact. Morrison smiled. Fear can be useful sometimes, but it shouldn't stop you from learning new things. We found that curiosity usually serves us better than panic when facing the unknown. The Admiral realized that his standard intimidation tactics were completely useless against these humans. They treated his massive warship and fearsome warriors as interesting subjects for study rather than threats to flee from. When it was time for the Tyraxians to return to their ship, Morrison escorted them to the airlock personally. Thank you for visiting, Admiral. We hope this is the beginning of a productive relationship between our peoples. Dr. Chang handed the Admiral a data pad containing her biological scans. I'd love to study Tyraxian science in exchange. Perhaps we could arrange regular meetings to share information. Ben Parker returned the examined plasma rifle to its owner. Really solid construction. With a few modifications, you could probably increase the firing rate by 30%. As the Tyraxian shuttle returned to the Dread Sovereign, Admiral Zethkar found himself deeply troubled. For the first time in his long career, he had encountered beings who simply refused to be intimidated by superior firepower. The humans had treated him with respect but not fear. They had shown curiosity about his species while remaining completely unimpressed by his threats. They acted as if meeting the galaxy's most feared empire was just another interesting day at work. Back on his bridge, the Admiral stared at the small human ship on his screens. His tactical officers waited for orders to destroy the impudent vessel, but Zethkar hesitated for the first time in centuries of conquest. These humans were unlike anything the Empire had encountered before. They might be primitive by Tyraxian standards, but they possessed something far more dangerous than advanced weapons. They had courage without limit, and curiosity without fear. The Admiral realized that news of this encounter would spread throughout the Empire. For the first time, in 3 millennia, someone had said no to the Tyraxian hegemony and lived to tell about it. News of the human encounter spread through Tyraxian space faster than their fastest ships. On worlds that had been enslaved for centuries, beings whispered about creatures who looked the Empire's warriors in the eye and offered them coffee. The story grew with each telling, but the core truth remained the same. Someone had said no to the Tyraxians and lived. Commander Ryan White led the second human diplomatic mission to the Zephyrian mining colonies in the Outer Rim. The Zephyrians were small humanoid beings with crystalline skin who had been slaves for over 800 years. They mined rare minerals under brutal conditions while Tyraxian overseers made sure they never stopped working. When the human ship UES Discovery arrived at the mining world of Kepler-7, the Tyraxian garrison commander immediately moved to intercept them. 3 massive patrol ships surrounded the small human vessel while broadcasting surrender demands. Ryan White responded with the same calm politeness that was becoming the human trademark. "This is Commander White of the United Earthship Discovery. We have a scheduled diplomatic meeting with the Zephyrian colony leaders. Please clear our approach to the landing zone." The Tyraxian commander could not believe what he was hearing. "Unknown vessel, you will surrender immediately. This system is under Imperial control. No unauthorized landings are permitted." White checked his mission orders on his tablet while his crew prepared for landing. "I'm sorry, but our diplomatic clearance is properly filed through the Galactic Commerce Authority. We'll be landing in 10 minutes as scheduled." The human shuttle descended toward the mining complex while the Tyraxian ships followed with weapons, powered but not firing. The aliens were confused about how to handle beings who simply ignored their threats while following proper bureaucratic procedures. Ambassador Kate Johnson waited in the shuttle with her diplomatic team. She had studied the reports from Captain Morrison's encounter and understood what made humans different. They did not see superior firepower as a reason to abandon their goals. The shuttle landed in the middle of the mining complex where thousands of Zephyrian workers had gathered to watch. They had never seen anyone challenge the Tyraxian overseers before. The small crystalline beings stood in silent amazement as humans walked out of their ship. 6 Tyraxian guards immediately surrounded the human delegation with plasma rifles raised. Their leader was a scarred veteran named Graktor, who had crushed dozens of slave revolts over the centuries. He had never failed to maintain order through fear and brutality. "Halt," he commanded in his most threatening voice. "You are trespassing on Imperial territory. Return to your ship immediately or face the consequences." Ambassador Johnson looked up at the 3-meter-tall alien and smiled politely. "Good morning. I'm Ambassador Kate Johnson. We have an appointment with Colony Manager Velthar to discuss trade agreements." She walked past the massive guards as if they were not there. Her diplomatic team followed while taking notes and photographs of the mining operations. The Tyraxians were so shocked by the casual dismissal of their authority that they forgot to stop them. The Zephyrian workers watched in stunned silence as humans simply ignored the beings who had terrorized them for generations. Some began to follow at a distance, curious about creatures who showed no fear of their oppressors. Velthar was an elderly Zephyrian whose crystalline skin had been scarred by years of hard labor. He met the human delegation in a small office, while Tyraxian guards stood outside the door. His hands shook with nervousness as he served them weak tea. "Honored visitors," he whispered, "I appreciate your courage in coming here, but the overseers will never permit trade agreements. They control everything we produce." Johnson opened her briefcase and pulled out official documents. "Actually, under Galactic Commerce Law Section 47, all sentient species have the right to engage in independent trade negotiations. The Tyraxian Empire signed those treaties 300 years ago." The old Zephyrian stared at the papers in amazement. "You mean we have legal rights? But the overseers said we were property of the Empire. Slavery was abolished in most of the galaxy centuries ago," Johnson explained patiently. "Your people are legally classified as an autonomous colony with the right to self-governance under Imperial oversight. That oversight doesn't include control of trade relationships." While the ambassador discussed legal details with colony leaders, her security chief, Danny Martinez, was examining the mining operation. He walked through the complex taking readings and photographs, while Tyraxian guards followed uncertainly behind. "Interesting setup you have here," he told Guard Captain Graktor conversationally. "Pretty inefficient, though. These workers could probably produce twice as much with better equipment and proper rest periods." The Tyraxian captain was used to cowering slaves and terrified colonists. He had no experience dealing with someone who critiqued his operations, while ignoring his weapons. "You will cease this inspection immediately or face punishment." Martinez looked at the alien with mild curiosity. "Punishment for what exactly?" "I'm conducting a routine trade evaluation as authorized under Galactic Commerce regulations. Would you like to see my credentials?" Meanwhile, Dr. Emma Foster was providing medical assistance to injured Zephyrian workers. She had set up a small clinic in one of the storage buildings and was treating malnutrition and workplace injuries while teaching basic medical techniques. "These working conditions violate at least 40 different galactic health and safety standards," she told the Tyraxian medical overseer. "I'll need to file a formal complaint with the Imperial Health Authority when I return to Earth." The overseer had never heard of anyone filing complaints about Imperial practices before. Most species were too frightened to question anything the Empire did. These humans seemed to view bureaucratic procedures as weapons more dangerous than plasma rifles. Bidekey. The end of the day, Ambassador Johnson had signed preliminary trade agreements with 7 different Zephyrian colonies. The deals were completely legal under existing galactic law, but had never been attempted because no one had been brave enough to challenge the Tyraxians directly. News of the human diplomatic mission spread to other enslaved worlds within hours. Species that had accepted oppression for centuries began to remember that they once had rights and freedoms. They started asking questions about the laws and treaties that supposedly protected them. On Tyraxis Prime, Emperor Valdros the Conqueror received reports about the growing unrest across 17 different star systems. For the first time in 800 years of absolute rule, his subjects were questioning his authority based on legal technicalities rather than military rebellion. The Emperor was a massive creature whose very presence had made seasoned warriors collapse in terror for centuries. His throne room was designed to intimidate visitors with its vast size and darkness, yet somehow these distant humans had managed to challenge his empire without ever setting foot on his capital world. Admiral Zethkar was summoned before the Emperor to explain how the human problem had grown so quickly. He knelt before the throne while reporting on the various diplomatic incidents across Imperial space. "These humans refuse to acknowledge our superiority, your magnificence," the Admiral explained. "They treat our laws and treaties as binding, agreements rather than meaningless documents. They act as if we are equals rather than conquerors." Emperor Valdros listened with growing anger. His empire had been built on the simple principle that superior force meant absolute authority. These humans seemed to believe that written agreements and legal procedures were more important than military power. "Summon the war fleet," the Emperor commanded. "We will show these humans and their supporters what happens when someone challenges the Empire. Bring me proof that these creatures bleed and die like all the rest." But even as the massive armada assembled around Tyraxis Prime, doubt had already begun spreading through the Imperial ranks. If these humans truly felt no fear of superior force, what other assumptions about conquest and control might be wrong? On distant Earth, Captain Morrison received reports from the various human diplomatic missions across the galaxy. The pattern was clear. Humans could ignore intimidation while other species could not. That difference was changing the balance of power throughout known space. The Galactic Empire had ruled through fear for 3 millennia, but humans had accidentally discovered that fear was optional. Now they would have to find out what happened when predators met prey that refused to run. The Tyraxian war fleet that assembled around Earth's solar system was the largest armada ever deployed in the Empire's 3,000-year history. 217 vessels ranging from massive dreadnoughts to swift attack cruisers formed battle lines that stretched across millions of kilometers of space. Leading the fleet was the Emperor's personal flagship, the Voidbreaker, a fortress ship 30 kilometers long that had never known defeat. Its weapons could crack planets and its armor could withstand the combined firepower of entire star systems. Emperor Valdros himself commanded from its bridge, determined to end the human problem permanently. Instead of hiding behind their planet's orbital defenses, the human fleet moved out to meet them in open space. 63 Earthships advanced in perfect formation, their crews singing battle songs and broadcasting messages of defiance across all frequencies. Admiral Helen Scott commanded the human fleet from the bridge of the UES Defiance, a heavy battleship that looked tiny compared to the smallest Tyraxian vessels. Her message to the alien armada was broadcast on every channel as the fleets closed the distance between them. This is Admiral Scott of the United Earth Defense Force. You are not welcome in this system. Turn your ships around and leave peacefully, or we will be forced to remove you ourselves. On the bridge of the Voidbreaker, Emperor Valdros listened to the translation with disbelief. The human fleet was outnumbered more than 3 to 1 by vessels that were individually more powerful than anything Earth possessed. Yet their commander was giving him ultimatums. Open fire, the Emperor commanded. Show them the price of defying the Empire. The battle began with a massive exchange of energy weapons that lit up space like a small star. Tyraxian plasma cannons and fusion torpedoes filled the void with deadly energy, while human ships responded with their own advanced weaponry. What followed defied every principle of military strategy that the Tyraxians had learned over millennia of conquest. Human ships did not retreat when outnumbered. They did not break formation when facing overwhelming firepower. When damaged, they moved closer to the enemy rather than falling back to safety. The destroyer, UES Courage, took direct hits from 3 Tyraxian heavy cruisers. Its hull was breached in dozens of places and half its crew was dead or wounded. Instead of surrendering or retreating, Captain Tom Bradley ordered his ship to ram the nearest enemy vessel while his remaining crew cheered. For Earth and the future, Bradley broadcast as his ship accelerated toward the Tyraxian cruiser. The collision destroyed both vessels in a massive explosion that lit up the battlefield. The human crew died singing their national anthem, while the alien survivors floated in shock through the wreckage. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Martinez led Marine boarding parties that fought their way through damaged Tyraxian ships with a ferocity that terrified veteran soldiers. When cornered by superior numbers, the humans did not surrender. Instead, they smiled and fought even harder. "These creatures fight like demons," reported Tyraxian Captain Zekvar as human Marines stormed his ship's bridge. "They show no fear of death. My warriors are breaking before their assault." Martinez led her team through corridor after corridor of the alien ship, using captured weapons and improvised explosives to clear their path. When her ammunition ran low, she fought with knives and bare hands while encouraging her troops with battle cries. In space around them, the larger battle continued with devastating intensity. Human captains used tactics that made no sense to the Tyraxians but proved brutally effective. Ships that should have been destroyed kept fighting. Crews that should have surrendered kept manning their weapons. The Tyraxian advantage in numbers and firepower began to erode, as human determination proved stronger than superior technology. Admiral Zethkar watched in amazement as his veteran crews began making mistakes under pressure from an enemy that simply would not break. Captain Jake Morrison, now commanding the upgraded UES Horizon, found himself facing impossible odds when his squadron was cut off from the main fleet. 5 Tyraxian battlecruisers surrounded his small group of ships with weapons charging for the final assault. His communications officer received surrender demands from the enemy commander. Morrison listened politely, then opened a channel to respond. "This is Captain Morrison to the Tyraxian vessels. I appreciate the offer to surrender, but that's never really been our style." Instead of trying to escape, Morrison ordered his ships to attack the center of the enemy formation. The human vessels charged directly into the overwhelming firepower like ancient cavalry, charging artillery lines. Their weapons blazed as they closed the distance, trading damage for the chance to hurt their enemies. 3 of Morrison's ships were destroyed in the first exchange, but the remaining 2 ships managed to reach close combat range, where the larger Tyraxian vessels could not effectively target them. The Horizon and its sister ship, Intrepid, raced between the alien battlecruisers like wolves among sheep. Emperor Valdros watched the tactical display in growing fury as his supposedly invincible fleet was systematically dismantled by an enemy that refused to acknowledge defeat. Human ships continued fighting even when critically damaged. Human crews kept manning their posts even when facing certain death. "How are they doing this?" he demanded of his tactical officers. "They should be broken by now. Their losses exceed 60% and they are still advancing." Admiral Zethkar studied the human communication intercepts with fascination. Instead of panic and despair, the alien channels carried jokes, encouragement, and technical discussions about weapon modifications. These creatures treated certain death as an interesting challenge. The turning point came when Captain Morrison's badly damaged Horizon found itself alone facing the Emperor's massive flagship after the rest of his squadron was finally destroyed. The tiny human ship was missing half its hull and most of its weapons, but it continued to advance toward the Voidbreaker. Morrison opened a direct communication channel to Emperor Valdros himself. His voice was calm and conversational despite the hopeless situation. "Your Imperial Magnificence, this is Captain Morrison. I should probably warn you that we've never been very good at knowing when we're beaten." The Horizon's remaining weapons opened fire on the massive flagship while Morrison's crew prepared for their final battle. They sang human songs and made jokes about the odds while fighting a ship that outmassed them by a factor of 10,000. Emperor Valdros felt something he had never experienced in 800 years of conquest. These humans were not just unafraid of death, they seemed to welcome it as long as they could hurt their enemies. They turned every disadvantage into a weapon, and every defeat into a moral victory. The battle raged for 18 hours until both fleets were bloodied and exhausted. The Tyraxians had superior numbers and firepower, but human determination proved impossible to break. Ships that should have been destroyed kept fighting with skeleton crews. Captains who should have surrendered kept ordering attacks. When the Voidbreaker's main weapons finally silenced the Horizon's guns, Morrison used his ship's quantum drive to ram the flagship's command section. The explosion tore through both vessels, killing Morrison and his crew while severely damaging the Emperor's ship. As rescue shuttles searched through the wreckage, Emperor Valdros realized that his empire had won a battle but lost something far more important. News of human courage was already spreading to every world in Imperial space. His subjects had seen that it was possible to fight the Empire and hurt it badly. The war ended not because the Tyraxians could not win, but because they finally understood what they were fighting. Humans were not just another species to be conquered. They were something far more dangerous, beings who genuinely did not understand the concept of hopeless odds. In the ruins of the Horizon's bridge, searchers found Morrison's final log entry. "We came to explore the stars and found that someone needed to learn a lesson about bullying smaller neighbors. I hope we taught it well." 6 months after the battle at Earth, Emperor Valdros requested a personal meeting with human leadership on the neutral world of Harmony Station. The request surprised everyone because the Emperor had never negotiated with anyone before. For 3 millennia, he had simply conquered or destroyed those who opposed him. President Maria Santos arrived at the meeting with only her aide and translator. She had refused military escorts or diplomatic security, much to the amazement of galactic observers. She walked into the meeting room where the most feared being in the galaxy waited and offered him her hand in greeting. "Your Imperial Magnificence," she said with a polite smile. "Thank you for agreeing to these talks. I hope we can find a solution that benefits everyone." Emperor Valdros studied the small human female with fascination. She showed no fear of his massive presence or terrifying reputation. Her heart rate was calm and her eyes met his directly. She treated him like any other political leader, rather than the conqueror of most of the known galaxy. "Your species has cost my empire dearly," the Emperor said in his deep voice. "Rebellion spread across 47 systems. My governors report daily challenges to imperial authority. Your people have taught others to question my rule." Santos nodded sympathetically while reviewing her notes. "Yes, that does sound like a problem. The thing is, Your Magnificence, people have always had the legal right to question their government under the treaties your empire signed. We just reminded them of that fact." The Emperor leaned back in his massive chair. No one had ever explained his own laws to him before. "You speak of legal rights as if they matter more than military strength." "Well, they do," Santos replied matter-of-factly. "Your empire can continue to exist, but the age of ruling through fear is over. People have seen that it's possible to say no to you. That makes you just another government that needs to earn legitimacy through good governance." While the political leaders negotiated, Dr. Lisa Chang was presenting her research findings to the Galactic Science Council. She had made disturbing discoveries about human psychology that explained why her species behaved so differently from everyone else in the galaxy. "Fear is universal among intelligent species," she explained to the assembled alien scientists. "It serves as a survival mechanism that prevents dangerous behavior. But humans evolved something unique, the ability to function despite being afraid, and to use fear as motivation rather than paralysis." The alien researchers listened with fascination as Chang displayed brain scans showing human neural activity during stressful situations. Unlike other species, human fear centers activated cognitive processing rather than flight responses. "We're not fearless," she continued. "We're something that might be more concerning for your empires. We're afraid of almost everything, but we do what needs to be done anyway. Fear doesn't control our decisions." Meanwhile, human merchant ships had begun regular trading runs through formerly restricted imperial space. Captain Amy Rodriguez commanded the cargo vessel UES Commerce on its route through the Outer Rim territories. Her ship carried medical supplies, advanced technology, and most importantly, new ideas. At each stop, human traders offered fair deals and respected local customs while quietly encouraging self-governance and civil rights. They provided technical assistance for infrastructure improvements and education programs that taught aliens about their legal rights under existing treaties. The changes spread faster than imperial forces could contain them. Worlds that had been enslaved for centuries began asserting their independence through legal channels rather than military rebellion. Colonial governors found themselves facing lawsuits and trade disputes instead of the traditional cowering submission. Admiral Zeth Carr had been assigned as liaison between the reformed Tyraxian government and the expanding human presence in imperial space. He worked from a new office on Harmony Station where he could observe human behavior directly. Every day brought new examples of human peculiarity. They established schools on former slave worlds. They provided medical care without demanding payment. They treated conquered species as equals worthy of respect and assistance rather than sources of tribute and labor. "I still don't understand them," he confided to his aide during one of their daily briefings. "They could have demanded territory or tribute after defeating our fleet. Instead, they offer trade agreements and cultural exchange programs." The aide, a young Tyraxian officer named Vel Karan, had been studying human behavior patterns. "Perhaps that's why they won, Admiral. They don't think like conquerors. They think like builders who want to create something better rather than just taking what others have built." On Earth, the victory celebrations had given way to serious planning for humanity's future role in galactic affairs. Captain Morrison's sacrifice had made him a hero, but leaders knew that military victories were less important than the cultural changes they had started. Admiral Helen Scott, now promoted to commander of human space forces, worked with diplomatic teams to establish permanent peacekeeping missions throughout former imperial territories. Human ships patrolled trade routes and protected smaller species from the chaos that followed the Empire's collapse. "Our job isn't to replace the Tyraxians as galactic overlords," she explained to her officer corps. "It's to make sure that nobody else gets the chance to rule through fear again. We're gardeners, not conquerors." The transformation of galactic society accelerated as more species discovered their courage. The Zephyrian colonies became centers of learning and technology development. Former slave worlds established democratic governments and began trading freely with their neighbors. Dr. Emma Foster opened medical schools on 17 different worlds, training local healers in advanced techniques while learning about alien biology and medicine. Her students were primarily from species that had been denied education under imperial rule. "Healing is universal," she told her mixed classes of humans and aliens. "Every species wants to reduce suffering and extend healthy life. When we share knowledge instead of hoarding it, everyone benefits." Commander Ryan White led exploration missions to the dangerous regions beyond imperial space where unknown civilizations might pose new threats. His ships carried diplomats and scientists rather than just weapons, prepared to meet whatever they found with curiosity rather than conquest. The galaxy watched in amazement as humans continued to behave unlike any other dominant species in recorded history. They shared their advanced technology freely. They refused to claim territorial conquests. They treated potential enemies as future friends who just hadn't been properly introduced yet. 2 years after first contact, Emperor Valdros announced his abdication in favor of an elected council representing all species in the former Tyraxian Empire. The announcement sent shockwaves through galactic civilization, as the most powerful ruler in known history voluntarily gave up absolute power. "The humans have shown us that strength comes from cooperation rather than domination," he said in his farewell address. "I conquered through fear, but they have built something far more powerful through hope and mutual respect." Admiral Jake Morrison had been posthumously promoted and honored with statues on dozens of worlds. But his real monument was the transformed galaxy, where former enemies worked together as equals. His final log entry became the motto of the new Galactic Federation. "We came to explore the stars and found that someone needed to learn about cooperation." President Santos stood on the observation deck of Harmony Station, watching ships from hundreds of different species docking peacefully. At the massive spaceport, trade vessels, exploration ships, diplomatic shuttles, and scientific research craft filled the traffic lanes in organized chaos. Her aide approached with the daily reports from across human space. Colonies were thriving. New species were being discovered and welcomed into the galactic community, and former enemies were becoming trusted allies and friends. "Ma'am," the aide said, "the exploration ship UES Pioneer is requesting permission to depart for the galactic rim. They want to investigate signals from beyond known space." Santos smiled as she remembered the courage of those first human explorers who had refused to be intimidated by the most powerful empire in the galaxy. Their legacy lived on in every ship that launched toward the unknown, with curiosity instead of conquest. "Permission granted," she said. "Tell them to remember that we're ambassadors of hope, not harbingers of fear. The galaxy is big enough for everyone." As the Pioneer disappeared into the darkness beyond the stellar rim, its crew carried with them the lesson that had transformed galactic civilization. Fear was optional, courage was contagious, and sometimes the greatest weapon against tyranny was simply refusing to be impressed by it.